The ability to work with previous versions of the product becomes very real out there in the real world. And so let's talk about your options here. If you're going to install SQL Server 2005, but then you need to have 2005 play well with earlier versions, you have a couple of options here. Notice, very interesting, we have coexistence or an upgrade. So let's take a look first at coexistence. Now this is very interesting. With coexistence, SQL Server 2005 will run side by side with earlier versions. So if you have SQL Server 2000 running on a machine and you want to see what 2005 is going to do for you, just simply install SQL Server 2005 on that server. It will install as a separate default instance, and it will run as a totally separate application, and it will not interfere with SQL Server 2000. Of course, now your memory and disk contention is going to be an issue, but as far as the applications behaving together, they play very well. Now this is very interesting. SQL 2005 can even be a named instance of a SQL 2000 default instance. If you know what named instances are, then this is pretty cool. If you don't, just stay tuned. You'll get it later on in the course. But you can make your SQL 2005 server a named instance of a SQL 2000 server. Now, when we talk about upgrading, pretty straightforward here. To upgrade a previous version of SQL Server to SQL Server 2005 is pretty straightforward. We're going to use the SQL Server 2005 setup program. So we're going to put our disk in, let it auto run, and we're going to go into setup program. And notice that we can directly upgrade any SQL Server 2000 installation that's running Service Pack 3. So step one, simply run SQL Server 2000, install Service Pack 3 on SQL Server. Not on Windows, but on SQL Server itself, and then you can upgrade that to 2005. If you have any version earlier than SQL Server 2000, you need to first upgrade 65, 70, whatever, to SQL 2000, then install Service Pack 3, and then upgrade to SQL 2005, and you're done. One other issue you may have to deal with are databases. If you've got a database that's in a previous version and you want to move it to a SQL 2005 box, you can simply use the Copy Database wizard. Okay, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later on. I'll show you where it is so you can see how to get to that. Now, one last thing I want to talk about here is maintaining compatibility. You're going to run into situations out there where you have a SQL 2005 box, but it's got to maintain some compatibilities with earlier versions because you can't use those early versions. This happens all the time in the real world. You have applications written to certain versions of databases, and it causes all kind of headaches and hassles to change those, and it's a budgetary thing. There's a stored procedure, notice DBCMPT level. There's a stored procedure out there. Don't know how to use stored procedures. Again, stay tuned. You'll see them later, but I wanted to put this here so that you know exactly where to get to this. And I'll show you the settings on this. If I run the stored procedure and pass it a parameter of 60, this is telling the SQL Server to work in a compatibility mode with SQL Server 6.0. This means behave and do right by the 6.0 boxes, okay? If I pass it 6.5 or 65, this is telling it to work in a compatibility mode with SQL Server 6.5 boxes. 7.0 obviously means SQL Server 7.0. Here's where it starts to break down. 8.0 or 80 means that the compatibility level is SQL Server 2000, and then 90, of course, means SQL Server 2005. So this is a way for you to basically tell SQL Server 2005 what to expect and who it's playing with and how to get along. So that's a real quick overview on how to deal with some of the previous versions, how to do upgrades, and how to coexist in the SQL Server 2005 world.